On this month's In the Life, a lesbian classic. Christopher Durang pushing buttons. Taking the system on. A family in transition.
Every day, I think about her.
And Pride and Resistance in Moscow. All this and more on America's Gay and Lesbian News Magazine.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Amerongen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation and by Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS and by the New Paul Foundation and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Welcome, I'm Katherine Linton. From 1993 to 2000, I was host of In the Life. I'm thrilled to be back to wrap up this season, our 15th year on public television. Next month, I'll be back to introduce you to our new host of the series. But first, here's a quick look at our ongoing search for the new face of In the Life.
And 3, 2, 1.
In the Life.
Alrighty, I got gum. That was too fast.
LGBTQ, LGBT.
Welcome to In the Life.
In the Life.
In the Life.
In the Life.
Next month, you'll get to meet him or her. Our first story looks back at one of the most popular love stories in lesbian cinema, Desert Hearts, a timeless classic. Released in 1986 and hailed by critics as a film of undeniable power, the film paved the way for a new wave of independent gay and lesbian cinema. It remains one of the top-grossing lesbian features of all time. As the film celebrates its 20th anniversary, we talked to two women who were behind and in front of the cameras.
This was such a labor of love from everyone that it was just this wonderful community set out in this little rinky-dink hotel in the desert.
Motel. Kidney-shaped pool.
Which a lot of goings-on on there.
Desert Hearts is about two women who fall in love when Vivian Bell goes to Reno, Nevada in 1959. There, she meets Kay Rivers.
Bessie Bell, Kay Rivers. How do you do? I love you. Vivian Bell. Put that damn car and drive!
On this 20th anniversary, Deitch is releasing a DVD with new interviews and behind-the-scenes treats for its devoted fans, young and old.
I can't begin to tell you how many times I've seen this movie.
I have like the original VHS.
That's a great job. I love you very much.
You did a great job. Thank you. Wonderful. Where are you from?
I'm from Nicaragua.
Thank you so much.
I just felt like this is my last time to make a DVD on this film, like in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to put some very special things and different things in it. And one of the things that I did is I have a special feature, and it's called Anatomy of a Love Scene. And you haven't even seen it yet.
I haven't. I'm really curious.
And so when and it's dailies.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, Robert?
Ready.
Action. And so there's one moment in it. It's really going to make you laugh because it's Helen's close-up, but you're starting like this. And so Patricia is saying, "Just relax, Toots. It's your close-up."
Am I in?
I'll hold you. Go ahead down. Get comfortable so you feel good.
Okay.
Close up, Toots.
Okay.
Action. It's really access to something very, very behind the scenes.
Most of those movies always ended unhappily.
It's the first movie that I ever saw with two women. You know, it didn't end in death, suicide, whatever.
Although by 1986 there had been some images of lesbian love on the big screen, director Donna Deitch had a vision of the movie she wanted to make.
Every movie that preceded this on the subject of a relationship between two women had ended in either a bisexual triangle or a suicide.
Okay.
Personal Best ended in a triangle there. I was given this book by a friend, Desert of the Heart, written by Jane Rule, and I read the book 7 times in a row, and I thought, you know, this book would really make the sort of film that I'm after. This was a film that was waiting to be born.
When I saw the script and I first read it, I thought, this is an incredible character.
Thank you for a really lovely day.
Every time she is around, the energy just has to, like, change.
Good luck.
And what an incredible challenge. I loved her from day one.
I wanted to make a universal love story, you know, as told through 2 female characters about 2 people who an audience would root for. You know, because that's what happens in a love story. They're either going to root for these 2 people to get together or they're not.
She picked my picture out of a stack of pictures in New York here and said, am I right?
Yes.
This girl looks
Yes.
like what Kay?
Yeah, I said, this is how I always imagined Kay Rivers to look.
Are you trying to shock me? No. I was only telling you the truth.
When she and Helen got together, it was just quite palpable. I mean, you could feel the chemistry. It was truly the right combination.
Yeah, it did. That was true.
Mm-hmm.
How did I prepare for the part? Well, I was a change apron in Lake Tahoe.
I think she wants to know how you prepared for the love scene.
Sex. Patricia. Oh, she's getting pretty racy here.
Uh-oh. How did you feel about having sex with a woman on film?
How did I feel about having sex with a woman on film? Well, okay. I found out 2 days before we started shooting that I was pregnant.
Her Desert Heart's baby is right over there somewhere.
Hannah! I saw your mom's movie when I was the same age that you are now.
That's why when you said 22, I
Blew my socks off.
I can say in that poster, yeah, my mom was pregnant with me in that poster.
No, I just had
had me.
Yeah, just had you. We had to go back and reshoot the poster because I couldn't get into the jeans.
As I recall, that was a bit of the...
But it really, really helped for my boobs.
Oh, God.
I knew Helen was around that little corner with her beautiful bathrobe on, her beautiful hair looking so magnificent.
My only clear memory is arriving. The rest is a blur. An absolute blur.
I'm like going, oh God, here comes the camera. Oh my God, here comes the camera. Get ready, do not show fear. Do not show fear.
And it was certainly not a scene about showing fear.
What do you think you're doing? Waiting for you.
Honestly, I think Helen is brilliant with that moment.
It just really worked.
It did. It's an amazing shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not taking off my robe.
Well, everybody draws the line somewhere. It's a really interesting question when people ask me about the intimacy because I felt so comfortable. I am one of another 4 sisters. I've been in an environment of women all the time. We always shared beds. I mean, it's just, I definitely come from a very maternal family. And I just never, I don't feel uncomfortable with women. I love being with women.
Whether the women are straight or gay, women tend to be more intimate with other women than with men in terms of friendships. And so I really wanted to mirror that.
Okay, now start talking.
You're gonna laugh.
This must be serious.
I think I found somebody who counts.
From the beginning, and don't step over the good parts.
Well?
I didn't want that lesbian relationship to sit outside of, other intimate friendships.
Well, rock and roll. That sounds a lot funnier than it is.
Like the relationship between Patricia's character and Audra Lindley's. That's full of friction, but it's just incredibly intimate. And when you see them talking late at night in bed,
If you come with me, you can quit the casino and go to art school.
it's full of that friction and mixed agendas. And yet, at the same time, their body language is so intimate. And
it's beautiful.
I gotta go. I'm not staying, so don't squeeze.
I think the film is so intimate because we were all so intimate.
The whole thing was tremendously, gratifying. I have not had that freedom since, not that much freedom, and I yearn for it.
So you're working on a sequel, or is that just
that's the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
The word is out.
The word is out.
The word is when, though.
Award-winning playwright and actor Christopher Durang is widely known for his controversial play, Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You. Heavily influenced by his Roman Catholic upbringing, his work has been described as sharp satire, rebellious, witty, irreverent. In our next story, we take a look at Durang's life and his influential work.
I killed myself. Anger turned inward, they say.
What is Durangian? I can't remember the first time I saw it written down, but I saw it in a review. I don't think it was even about me. I think it was about someone else. But I thought, oh, wow, Durangian. I've arrived.
But at least I got to miss 9/11. Oh, if I couldn't stand Skylab, I definitely couldn't stand the sight of people jumping out of windows. And letters with anthrax postmarked from Trenton. Oh.
It seems to be a somewhat skewed comic look at things, and or looking at something dark but finding it funny.
And in some quarters, people danced in the streets in celebration. It's, oh, lots of people killed. Yippee, yippee, yippee. It's, oh, God, I hate human beings.
Glad I killed myself. You know, in the afterlife, I'm considered to have a bad attitude.
Well, I think a Christopher Durang typical play would be often center around a family where they're hoping for the best, and yet because of some member of the family or some horrible God, things go terribly wrong. You know, I think this sense of chaos and cruelty right outside the door, and a kind of such a desire for things to go the way they should, the way you pray that they will, and profound disappointment when things go so terribly wrong.
I think an awful lot of my humor comes from the difficulties in my family. My parents are no longer living, but my father was an alcoholic, and there were also alcoholics on both sides of the family. My mother was one of those people who ultimately end up in Al-Anon, but who, before they go to Al-Anon, try to change the alcoholic endlessly. I became this hyper-vigilant child, worried all the time about the fighting that would occur. It was just nerve-wracking to be around, and also it didn't seem like it had a solution. My early plays, which were absurdist, I didn't realize I was writing about them. My plays were very anarchic, were very dark, very extreme, and the people who liked them found them very funny, and then some people just were horrified and turned off by them.
And now my first guest today is Christopher Durang, playwright or Satan worshiper. You be the judge. Mr. Durang, do you hate Satan?
Actually, I don't believe in Satan.
Well, what else don't you believe in? America? Tell me, when you wrote your dirty little sex play, Sister Mary Ignatius, who was your collaborator? Was it by any chance Satan?
No, I wrote it myself.
Well, isn't that special?
And you know, It's not a sex play. It's about religious fanaticism. And even if you don't like it, don't you think free speech is important?
Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You is about a nun who comes out explaining the dogma that I grew up being taught from age 6 to 20. It's important to me that she explain everything in the world, thus explains it all for you, because the church very much in its teachings has an answer for absolutely everything. It's about authoritarianism, and it's about, which feels more relevant now, people who believe 100% that they're right. You were so constantly taught what was going to send you to hell, because mortal sin would send you to hell, and mortal sin was serious sin. That makes sense, so murder is serious sin. But anything about sex is a mortal sin, just about anything. You know, and when you're taught that at age 7, you just accept it. When I realized I was gay, it makes me a little blockheaded, but it was my freshman year in college. I was very religious, and then mid-year I just stopped being religious. So once I stopped believing, I found that, I don't know, my brain started to feel more open to other things. I was walking down the street, and somebody my age went the other way, and I turned around to look, and I thought to myself, why did I do that? What was that? And I went, oh my God, I'm gay. And, you know, I was like 19, so I was shocked. So that's a long time not to know. I was very tortured about it for a while. Society said it was wrong. I had been told that no gay person could ever be happy, and that they didn't have any happy relationships, and it was really like a very bad lifestyle. I actually went to therapy asking to be helped to change. And then as it went on, we realized that my nature didn't seem to want to be, or it was you know, I suppose, you know, if I spent 99% of every morning day, you know, saying, I'm not going to be gay, I'm not going to be gay, I could do that, but what's the point of it? There's other things in life. I don't know that I ever, in terms of coming out, I didn't have a debutante moment. I did have a couple of relationships, but I kept them very quiet, and I, you know, sort of kept them from my roommates and all that kind of stuff. But then when I went to graduate school, which was in the arts, Yale School of Drama, I figured correctly that being in a theater atmosphere, it would be much easier to be open about being gay.
I saw him on stage in The Marriage of Bet and Boo, which is like my favorite play ever. And I just remembered looking at him and thinking there was a light behind his eyes that I was attracted to. I wasn't thinking I want to date this guy or anything. I just loved the play. And I kept bringing people back to the play over and over again.
Let's go to dog park.
About a year later, we were both in a movie, and we were in the same scene. And I saw him, but they had his hair like kind of greased down and everything, and I heard the director, Herbert Ross, call him Chris. And I thought, oh my God, I think that's Chris Durang. And I asked him, are you Chris Durang? And he said, yes. And the rest?
I love that he has a very buoyant personality. It cheers me up a lot of the time. When I was getting to know him once, I was feeling gloomy about something, and he was listening sympathetically, but at a certain point he looked at me and he went, like I was a baby or something, and it made me laugh and actually got me out of my mood. So I like that part of him.
We all look for connection of somebody who's going to get us. And when you find somebody that gets you and appreciates you and doesn't try to stop you, he may shake his head and go, oh my God, you're nuts. Because I'm a lot to deal with. And he deals with it brilliantly.
I've learned that I'm popular with young audiences, including in high school. And because I have a website, I sometimes get letters from them, and this really makes me happy. I think the best thing for me about teaching is I really like finding talent and encouraging it. I had been worried about teaching that it might sap my energy, and I would say 90% of the time it energizes me. I like being around young people who, frankly, I wouldn't be around otherwise, and they're all a little more bushy-tailed about playwriting than I can be anymore.
Shall I go with what the plan is? Yeah. The plan is that basically we're going to talk about musicals.
Marcia Norman is a fairly famous playwright. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Night Mother. I love teaching with Marcia Norman. I think our joint sensibilities come together in a good way. You know, I have had the experience of being in a play I've written, and we know how nervous we get about the critics coming and how hard that is. But when I'm in it, it's slightly easier on some level than when I'm just the author, because when I'm the author, Once the performance begins and critics are there, there's nothing else you can do.
Has this opening changed its size because the pillar's larger?
Smaller. You know what happened? The pillar's larger.
It is a terribly complex thing, putting a show together. I mean, there are just so many elements. Theater in general is collaborative, certainly the actors and directors and the writer, and I've learned also how important set is. It's all important, lighting and costume too. I don't have a favorite color. Everybody has a favorite color. No, I don't know, brown. It's the first thing that pops into your head. You've given it no thought, and it's a really weird color for her and for us to think of. Okay. And then the switch you make after is just fine when you sort of warm up to sky and trees. So it's only that one moment. I do say that Adrift in Macau is Chris Durang in a good mood, and I say that partially to give a clue to the audiences that it's not one of my dark plays.
And wondering about so many things. Tomorrow is coming.
Adrift in Macau just sort of came out of playfulness.
Nervous because of my past. I'm adrift in Macau, adrift in Macau, and time don't move fast.
This is sort of odd to say, but when I was a child, I was given a gift when I was 8 of a wooden stage with little Disney people on it, and for years I put on plays in the attic with these people all by myself, and that was fun. But doing it with live people is so much more complicated. So sometimes I long to go back to the attic, but I guess I can't.
Time's moving slow. Time's moving slow.
And each production becomes a little family, and that the family aspect of that is really nice. And then you try to keep up with those people, and they all go off to different productions. They're, you know, it's a real test who are the ones you really keep up with 10 and 15 years later.
Hi, I'm Sigourney Weaver.
Hello, I'm Julie Haggerty. And we're movie stars.
He's got such a true, direct way of looking at the world, kind of with his head cocked to one side, a bit dubious, but hoping for the best.
These are the kind of friends I have.
There's so much joy and love of life.
Ah! You're here already. Who let you in? Well, never mind. Oh, dear.
And so much disaster and fear and horror. And that delicate balance, I think, is what we all respond to in Chris's work. You know, and you never know when the serial killer is going to come out of the spare room.
What a place and what a city.
My life in the theater, I think, has been very lucky.
Do you like when we repeat the city?
I do get excited about the longevity of, I've just been around for actually 30 years writing plays, and that's, that feels kind of nice. That's nice.
In this next story, we hear about Lorenzo Taylor, a man whose lifelong dream came to a halt when he was denied entry into the Foreign Service because he is HIV positive. This prompted him to file suit against Condoleezza Rice and the State Department. Since the federal government serves as a model for the private sector's employment policies regarding workplace discrimination, the outcome of this case could set a far-reaching precedent.
When I was in probably about 7th grade, Mrs. Baldwin had us do a geography day. We talk about the languages of the country, we talk about the politics, and I think that was like my first real enthusiasm about the world outside of Birmingham, Alabama. I had a passion for languages, passion for learning about folks that were different. When I was a student at Georgetown, I used to have an atlas, and I would plot my little trips around the world. Once I knew I had HIV, I thought that I had maybe 6 months or a year. The dream of being a Foreign Service officer, something that I thought about or dreamed about since I was a teenager just went out the window.
But Lorenzo was one of the lucky ones. He remained strong and healthy and was active in international affairs, holding government positions throughout the 80s and 90s.
Colin Powell came in as Secretary of State back in the year 2000. Powell had been running around the world talking about stigma and discrimination against people with AIDS.
No stigmatization. They are just like anyone else. This is one of those lessons we have to get to all employers and nations around the world.
We started to think that maybe this might be a good time to push for opening the Foreign Service to people that are HIV positive.
Along with 15,000 applicants to the Foreign Service that year, Lorenzo took the written and oral parts of the exam. Only 15 to 20% pass. Lorenzo was one of them.
Just to make it through that whole process was really exciting.
Exactly.
It really felt like I had a lot of people who had known that this was something I'd wanted, who were there for me. It was really wonderful.
And then came the medical screening.
And one of the pieces they gave me was a form that said HIV testing at the top. And the third paragraph down, it said that if you're HIV positive, you will be no longer considered eligible for employment.
Being HIV positive is one of several medical conditions that require medical monitoring and medication.
That means they have to be able to serve at 100% of our posts, or we won't hire them. And we're assuming that everyone who is HIV positive can't do that, so we're denying every applicant who's HIV positive.
You are simply not eligible to go to the most difficult posts, the greatest hardship posts. Therefore, you're not worldwide available.
To have it put so succinctly and clearly was jarring. I mean, it was really, really surprising. And I thought, how many people would just have walked out who are HIV positive, would have just walked out at that point? Something inside me just pushed me forward and said, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to get through this.
Good morning. My name is Lorenzo Taylor, and I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1956. As a child, I attended segregated schools, segregated churches, and segregated everything else. Jim Crow prevailed in Alabama and was vigorously enforced. I was a member of 6th Avenue Baptist Church, where Dr. King, Reverend Jackson, and Dr. Abernathy often spoke. I remember seeing my pastor and courageous members of my church boarding buses to Washington in August of 1963 and watching with my mother when freedom marchers of both races attempted to integrate the lunch counter.
In 1963, he was 7 years old when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed during Sunday school, killing 4 little girls.
I went to a church that wasn't very far from there, and I remember being huddled together and being told, that something terrible had happened. This was really a dark day. The entire force of the state were against what we were doing. But the thing that I felt and remember the most from that period was that someday this would change. I mean, we were always engrossed in the movement in one way or the other.
At age 21, Lorenzo was accepted to the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. Not only was he one of the few African-American students on campus, he also came out as a gay man his sophomore year.
There had been an African-American students group that I was involved with, so we thought, well, we'll try to do the same thing with the gay student group. The administration came down very hard and said absolutely not, that having a gay student group would be in violation of Catholic Church doctrine. Just having been involved in that struggle at Georgetown just gave me that extra passion to not just come out, but to also claim my rights as a gay person.
Then, in the early 80s, AIDS changed everything. Lorenzo went to the 1983 March on Washington and met Tony.
Tony was just a funny, energetic, inquisitive, remarkable person. We're together for a couple of really wonderful years. He'd gone to the doctor and found out that he had, in fact, been infected with HIV. This was really at a point at which being diagnosed with HIV was a death sentence. You were really looking around, waiting to find out who was next. And you were going to funerals and reading obituaries, and as a 28, 29-year-old, trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? What have I accomplished? How do I want to make a mark?
Years later, in 2001, at 45 years old, Lorenzo passed the rigorous state exam again, only to be denied his dream. The State Department is still enforcing a 1986 ban on hiring HIV-positive applicants to the Foreign Service.
It was a rational and humane policy at that point, but it certainly doesn't make any sense now.
Lorenzo Taylor is suing Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which states that no otherwise qualified individuals with handicaps shall be subjected to discrimination.
Here you have the government, our own government, that's supposed to be a model employer. It's supposed to do a better job than the private employment sector under the law when it comes to accommodating people with disabilities and hiring people with disabilities. And yet here we have this exceptionally qualified person, Lorenzo Taylor, and the government is refusing to hire him based on outmoded assumptions about what it means to be HIV positive.
In 1996, with the advent of what we call HAART, highly active antiretroviral therapy, that really made HIV a completely manageable disease. Nowadays, we have a regimen that is one pill once a day, can completely suppress your virus with almost no toxicity, no side effects. I've been taking care of Lorenzo for over 10 years. He's one of the successful HIV patients, and his viral load is consistently suppressed to an undetectable level.
The fact that I can manage my own health condition and that I am, according to my own doctors and according to their examination, except for HIV, incredibly healthy, I think makes it difficult to me to understand the arguments.
So a victory in this case is going to be very important, not just for making the federal government do what it needs to do, but also letting everyone know that discrimination is still happening today and that it's illegal.
We're very sympathetic to Mr. Taylor, but at the same time, this principle of worldwide availability cannot be compromised. Leading a normal life in New York or Washington isn't at all the same thing as leading a normal life in Ouagadougou or in Harare or in many other places in the world.
Therefore, other members of the service are going to have to take up that slack. You're not available to go to work in the consulate in Dili in East Timor, or in Zimbabwe, where they even have food shortages. And someone is going to have to go to that post, and therefore someone else the burden is going to fall on someone else instead of being shared fairly and equally across the Foreign Service.
I was certainly willing to travel anywhere and be posted anywhere in the world that the State Department would have put me.
My suspicion is that the blanket ban on new employees who are HIV positive doesn't come from the doctors. It comes from policymakers who have absolutely no concept of what the status of HIV is in this day and age.
You have essentially two choices. One is to maintain a uniform policy that applies to everyone, or the other choice is you have a case-by-case approach. And when you're dealing with 14,000 existing employees and 20,000 who annually, every single year, take the Foreign Service exam, is that second choice really an option?
They're trying to justify their policy by saying that if we let Lorenzo Taylor serve as a Foreign Service officer, we're going to have to let everyone else serve. That isn't what the law requires, and they know that. That law requires you look at the individual. And in fact, when you look at the individual, and you look at Lorenzo Taylor, he can serve.
It's a real 1985 mentality in the 2000s that doesn't recognize the whole evolution in HIV healthcare that's taken place. Dr. Rice and I grew up both in Birmingham, Alabama. There's a lot I'd like to tell her. Her sterling qualifications have been doubted by other people, challenged by other people, and she's been able to rise to where she is. I would want her to see that this is part of the same struggle. Opening a window, a door of opportunity to people that are HIV positive is so important and sends such a strong message to people that are living with HIV around the world that everyone is treated fairly and given the opportunity to serve.
Mark and Alex Farley were born as identical twin boys. During their adolescence, both came out as gay. Several years later, Alex informed his family that he was transgender and planned to transition from male to female. Over a period of nearly 4 years, a documentary crew chronicled the Farley family's journey as they moved towards acceptance of a troubled past and an uncertain future in the award-winning film, Red Without Blue.
Can you say good morning, Alex? Can you say good morning, Mark?
No.
Alexander, Mark.
Alex and I were born 3 minutes apart, March 7th, 1983. My mom would put us in our cribs, and then we would jump into each other's and sing and play and dance.
There were always these examples of their twinship, and the most profound one, I think, is when I went down. They were probably 4, and they were just waking up, and Mark looked over and said, "We were falling. Have you hit yet?"
Hello, Mark, you little birthday boy. How's your birthday? Hi, Alex.
I really don't think that I was born in this world as a man or as a woman. I think the process of changing was the path I was born into. I've been going to school at the San Francisco Art Institute for about 5 months. I was given the word blue for my final sculpture. And, you know, the word blue, the first thing I think of is Alex, how that was the color that he was given as a baby and how I was given red.
Being identical twins, Jenny, when the twins were born, assigned each of them a color. So Mark was red and Alex at the time was blue. And so the meaning of the title is really Mark without Alex. Jenny, the twins' mom, is the most amazing, wonderful person, one of the most amazing, wonderful people I've ever known. Actually, she's just incredibly honest and candid and just truthful about her experiences.
Oh, that feels good.
When they were in kindergarten, I asked their teacher, "Do you think Mark and Alex are gay?" Because they were so sweet and much more feminine in who they were than masculine. And she said, "Oh, no, they're not gay. You can always tell." I saw her, maybe 3 years ago, and I told her who they were today and everything, and she was just flabbergasted. I asked her, I said, "Do you remember my asking you if they were gay?" And she said, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, you were wrong."
Well, I decided I wanted to live as a woman when I was in high school. I went out and bought some dresses, and I wasn't very passable, I would say, but it was probably like within a month or two of just kind of fooling around with dressing that I decided that I was going to live full time. It's still hard for me at times because we were born as twins, we were born as boys. That's part of our identity, that's part of my identity. He said, you don't like who you look like, your physical body. Part of who we were, I think, was lost in that transformation. It was almost like you were cutting this cord that we had, you know? This twinship, this identical identity. I just couldn't imagine you desiring to be something else because it was who I was and it was who you were. You didn't want to be like me, and that's why you hated yourself as much as you did and hated me at times. We had a really fun childhood. Jump roping and eating popsicles, playing hide and go seek. That was before things became complicated.
Why are you running away from the camera?
The problems really started when they went to high school, and then everything sort of went to hell, and their grades were bad, and their attendance was off.
I don't even know how it all started, but it progressed really quickly from marijuana and then cocaine and then medication. I wanted to escape, and it wasn't working anymore, escaping the way I was. I asked Alex to make a promise. I told him he had to say yes before I told him what it was.
I heard the garage door open, and they drove in. I went out there, and they told me that they tried to commit suicide. Can't even comprehend what that might be like.
I've spent a lot of sleepless nights trying to absolve myself of my own insistent responsibility for what happened. I mean, I know that I have them back, but I really don't think of them as my children. You know? They're young people I know.
Guess what? I got an email from a lad. Do you remember him from grade school?
Oh, yeah. He was that, like, kind of dorky kid that played Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah, but he's not lad anymore.
Hey. Hello. How's it going?
He's actually Rachel.
I'm doing great.
When Rachel and Claire go skeet shooting, it's a powerful scene just because, you know, it really illustrates how you can identify as a woman, but it doesn't mean that you need to give up this boyish part of your personality.
When you say pull, I'll throw it. Pull.
Did I hit it?
Bring the stool over here by us.
Okay.
At the end of the film, we have probably one of the most powerful scenes, which is Christmas Eve. And Jenny, the twins' mother, is celebrating Christmas Eve with her daughter, Claire, and Claire's friend, Rachel. Jenny really has the opportunity to see Rachel's rejection by her parents. Jenny realized that she wants a relationship with her child, and she doesn't want her child to hurt in the same way that Rachel's hurting.
It's so valuable to me to have Claire in my life that my biases have slipped away. But part of that slipping away is the mourning of the loss of Alex.
I don't know where I'd be without Claire. No matter what changes Claire or I go through, she'll always be my other half. I'm really excited that she's going to be moving to San Francisco because she is, you know, my best friend and someone I can really count on.
I really felt strongly about putting something out there that really celebrates, you know, what people can overcome and how, you know, you can really grow from the experiences that you've had.
Hey! How's it going?
We met in the park where the sunlight and shadow entwine.
Welcome to San Francisco.
I know, it's officially my home now.
But I wish on that day I'd been blind.
It used to be that Gay Pride only happened in June. It's generally celebrated on the third Sunday of the month to commemorate the Stonewall riots. But now, Pride occurs at different times of the year, depending upon what city, state, or country you live in. In this next story, you'll hear from members of the community as they reflect upon what Gay Pride truly means to them. Also, we take you to Russia to hear about an attempt to gather publicly to recognize Gay Pride in May of 2007.
The first time I went to a Pride event would have been in Boston sometime in the 1980s. And you have to realize I grew up in very small town Virginia. There were bars in Roanoke about 40 miles away from where I lived, and periodically people from Jerry Falwell's church would come and stand outside them photographing people coming in and out. So they would actually, you know, you'd bring your paper bag over your head to the bar and pick up a paper bag and put it over your head as you were leaving.
It took me a long time to realize I was a lesbian. I didn't even know the word for the strange feelings I had. You know what I'm saying? My mother must have noticed something because she kept saying to me, because I used to say that I wanted to get out on my own, and because I figured if I left home I could be like I wanted to be and live like I wanted to live. And she used to say, only way you're gonna leave my house is with a ring on your finger or in a pine box.
It seems to me that the opposite of pride is shame. And I think that pride, in a big way, is letting go of that shame and really embracing who you are. And that the fact of the matter is that you're part of this community that dares to be different.
I have deep respect and love, really, for the folks who are willing to get out in the streets, and whether it's the Dykes on Bikes or whether it's the gay lawyers group or kids with strollers, it's still about feeling a connection.
Marching is a very symbolic act in American history. When we have movements, they don't just protest, they march, they go places. There's a sense of progress.
Give me what we want, and that's noise. Be loud and proud. Make some noise!
I was throwing my arms up and acting like a crazy woman. And just wanted to embrace everybody that I saw in the street, you know, and it was just out of this world.
There's so few times when you see tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of gay people in one place.
Also celebrate our differences, celebrate the fact that we are different, and that's not something to be ashamed of, something to revel in, be proud of.
My name is Fernanda von Manstein. I'm the leader of one of the newest fashion and conformist movements, and I'm the participant of the second Moscow Gay Pride. There was no legal to ban the parade because the official document lacks precision, which Moscow authorities ignored. Mayor Lushkov blessed homophobes when he publicly named a gay march a satanic action.
My colleague Scott and I, we went to Moscow to observe the gay pride. And what I remember is that when we were there was so much aggression and violence.
Some cars drew up outside City Hall. 49 European politicians calling for freedom of assembly. They got out of the cars and they were immediately surrounded. The melee was so instant and so intense that it was difficult, if you were right on the edges of it, as I was, even to see what was going on.
Why you don't protect? I'm a member of parliament! I'm a member of parliament! Why you don't protect?
A group of people, again, mostly young, mostly unconnected with the organizers, were trying to raise rainbow flags and make a sort of stand. And two things happened. The skinheads started advancing up the street, and these ranks of riot police, 4 deep, started moving down the street. And what they were doing basically was to push the two sides against each other. So instead of trying to separate the peaceful demonstrators from the skinheads, they shoved them up against each other. I saw a man beaten severely by skinheads. He lay on the street screaming. 2 women around him turned to the riot police and they said, "What are you going to do? Help him, keep the people away from him." And the riot police stood there impassively.
And at the same time, they were shouting all kind of terrible things, like gay blood should be spilled on the streets of Moscow.
Dmitry Antonov, one of the fanatics, declared in front of cameras, "I'm a religious man, and as such I say, death to faggots." That's the true face of Russian pure morality.
Some of the skinheads were informing. That was obvious. One of them went up to a riot policeman, pointed at me, and the next thing I knew, I was grabbed and thrown into one of the riot police trucks.
I was among those who put out the symbols of LGBT movement. Like many others, we didn't escape the arrest.
Well, what Fernanda told me, we met each other in front of the police station, and she was released while we were waiting there, so I started to talk to her. And she said, my goal is that in Russia, my own country, I would like to say publicly that I love my girlfriend, and I don't want to be punished for that. So she was very motivated to show the world that things are wrong in Russia and should be amended.
Russia 10 years ago was trying hard to become a democracy. Russia now has leaders who are trying hard to make it a dictatorship. What happened at Moscow Pride was a symptom of that.
Still, the pride wasn't broken up despite the surge of hatred. We hope that our action is approved by many wise and cautious people.
A few managed to make their way up to the statue of the founder of Moscow, and they unveiled their rainbow flags. And the police who were around them, who had these barricades everywhere, the skinheads were throwing things at them and menacing them. The police said, "Oh, why don't you come back here and we'll protect you?" They opened the barricades, they let the women through, they immediately threw them into the police trucks, where they were kept for hours in the heat. One of them was severely injured and kept saying to the police, "I have a concussion." He got no medical help. It was basically an effort by the police to say, "Screw you, this is Moscow, we own the streets, you don't."
I'm Katherine Linton. Thanks for tuning in, and please join us next month.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Amerongen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation and by Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS and by the New Paul Foundation and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.